the last day of our social media webinar series. Today's topic is the ABCs of websites. This is Amanda. I'm also joined by Lindsay Pashow on the call. If you've been here before, then you know, but if this is your first time coming to this series, then just drop any questions that you have in the chat or the Q&A section, and we will go ahead and get started. So if you were with us with the last few webinars in this series, this one's going to be a little bit different. I know the other ones were very technical, where you watched us do it and went step by step on creating the social media sites or creating a post. This one's going to be a little bit different just because there's not one set way to do this. And we've also kept these slides a little bit shorter than the other ones just because we wanted to leave lots of time for questions. So just really quickly, I want to go over the topics that we're going to go over. We're going to have some general vocabulary, picking a platform to use for your website, what pages of a site are included, and of course, like some best practices to keep in mind when you're creating your website. Like I said earlier, if you have any questions, please just drop them in the chat or the Q&A, and we will have plenty of time for that at the end. So the first thing that I wanted to discuss is just some general vocabulary to understand and know before you even think about making your website. So how I kind of do it is I think of a website as a house, right? And if your website is the entire house, obviously you're the owner, your business is the owner. The domain is your address. So this is how people find your website. This is what they search up to be able to go to your website. And it looks like what's written there. It starts out with the www dot whatever your domain is. So this one is farm example, and then it always ends either at .com. Typically most of your website's going to be .com. It could also end in, in a .edu if it's a school, or a .org. It's all very dependent on how you set it up, but .com is the typical one that we use. From there, the pages of your website are your rooms. So these are separate sections of the website that hold different content for different purposes. And we'll go into what exactly your pages might be on your website. But typically they have a homepage, a contact page, you might have a products page, things like that, that hold separate information throughout the website. Next up is the design, which is how you would decorate your house. That one's kind of obvious. So the colors that you choose, maybe the font that you choose, the layout of the website, things that kind of add to the aesthetic of it. And then lastly, would be the hosting platform, which if you're thinking of a house, that would be like your mortgage company. And basically what this is a separate company that they give you the template for your website, they allow you to access it, and you pay them either monthly or yearly. And they basically, it's what it sounds like, they host your website for you. So they do all of the back end work, all of the coding, all of the things that we don't know how to do as regular people, and it would be way too difficult to try to learn just so you could have a basic website for your farm. One of the first things that people typically ask me is, do I need a website? And my answer is almost always yes. And it's for a few different reasons, but one of the main ones is that it gives you an online presence. And in today's digital world, that's typically how new customers are going to find you. Obviously, word of mouth is really big in the farming community, but someone could tell me about your business and maybe tell me where you're located, but I may not remember that in 2 weeks. I may not remember exactly where they said you were or exactly what you do. I may have just heard about it and said, oh yeah, one of my coworkers told me about a beef farm that's nearby. I think it was this name. And I'm going to look it up. And if nothing shows up when I Google you, then really I'm going to be very discouraged. Just because I don't know if you even exist. I don't know if I remembered your name right. And it just adds a lot more steps. Now I have to go back to that person, ask again. So having some type of online presence available for when people do look you up is extremely, extremely helpful. Even if it's just the basics, even if it's just, quick, 2-page website that has your contact information and what you do. It's better than nothing. So that online presence alone is really, really important. Next up, which kind of goes along with this, is it gives you credibility. And what I say there where it says both in person and online is the in-person aspect is kind of what I just talked about, right? It makes, if I look you up and I see that you have a website, as a person, I'm saying, oh, okay, great. They do exist. They are a credible company. They're not gonna, it's not some type of scam. It's not fake. I know exactly what they are now. And the online credibility is a little bit different. When I say that, I'm talking about in terms of what's called search engine optimization, which we won't get too much into, but it basically means that all of the algorithms, all of the back end things that are going into Google, they are recognizing that your company exists. They're recognizing that maybe it goes along with your Facebook page or your Google business page that maybe you set up earlier, me or Lindsay, and from watching our webinars. So having multiple different forms of your business being online helps the algorithm really connect the dots and say, okay, this business is legitimate. They are real. And we can bump them up on the Google searches because of that. If you only have one, or maybe you have multiple websites under different names, your credibility starts to go down with Google or Bing or any search engine, and they start to rank you lower. And you just don't come up as often for people who are searching for you. Next up would be the customer convenience aspect. Again, kind of goes along with my first point. It gives customers one place to find all of the information they need. So while you may have a Facebook page that has, your address and your phone number, if you don't have a website, it can still be a little hard to decipher exactly what you do. So maybe you just posted on Facebook recently that, you sell beef, but you didn't mention that you sell pork. So if I'm visiting your Facebook page, I'm getting little bits of information at once, but your website will really give me a whole view of your company. I'll say, oh, not only do they have beef, they have pork, and they have a little farm stand. That's so nice. Or it'll give me just a little bit more background as a consumer, and helps me find all that information that I need very conveniently. Another section of your website that maybe adds to why you would need a website is you can tell people about your products and services. Again, going through the full gamut of what you have and what you offer. It also gives you an opportunity to dive a little deeper into those things that you offer. So while I may know that you sell beef, if I didn't see on your website that you have grass-fed or organic or whatever your selling point is, your website allows you to go into deeper detail on that and kind of give a better explanation of everything. And last up is obviously your marketing. A website is a very large part of marketing. It, again, gives people a one-stop shop for everything. It also gives them an opportunity to kind of see who you are. So if you're going to put an About Us page or kind of tell your farm story, then it really helps that marketing of selling your business and selling all of the things that you have to offer, not just the products, but the internal things, kind of selling your story, I guess is the best way to put it. So for those reasons, I would say almost everyone needs a website. If you are looking at this and you're saying, I don't really care about any of that, well, that's a personal decision, but I definitely highly suggest it for almost all small businesses. So now that you've decided whether or not you even want to create a website, the first thing that you're going to look at is which website hosting platform you would like to use. So if you're going back to our analogy of the house, like I mentioned, the platform is like your mortgage company. So it's a separate company that helps you create your website. They may give you the template, and you pay them a monthly or yearly fee to get access to the services, the template, any extra features that you might want. But they kind of give you the framework for your website, and you just need to go in and change up the design of it and add in your own wording, change the colors, things like that. But it is fairly user-friendly nowadays. It's maybe not as difficult as it used to be in the past, which is nice. There are some major platforms. We can't suggest any over the other, but just some big names that are out there. Google has what's called Google Sites. There's GoDaddy, Squarespace, Wix. There are a few other ones, but those are just some if you need to get started at looking at which platform you'd like to go with. Those are a good starting point. And there are a few things to take into consideration when you are picking which platform to use. First and foremost is cost. So many of these platforms do have a free version. I don't typically recommend them. And the main reason is sometimes with the free versions, they have their own marketing embedded into your website. So maybe you're not able to create your own custom domain. And what I mean by that is that address that people use to find you. If you have, a base plan that you're paying for, you typically get to have a customizable domain. So you can make that domain whatever you want. So if you're going with a www.farmexample.com, if you do a free version, some of these sites don't let it be that simple. They add in their own marketing piece to it. So it may be www.farmexample.wixwebsite.com. And the reason that matters so much is you're not going to want to change your domain too frequently. Once you have your domain, I would really suggest you stick with it for the long haul. So keep that in mind when you are picking your domain. But it also makes it a lot simpler for people to find you if you don't include that extra piece. Because if you just put www.farmexample.com and you leave out that middle piece, it won't pull up your website, and people won't be able to find you. So I would definitely suggest either if there is a free version that lets you customize your domain, go with that, or just do the base version. Typically with some of these websites I listed, the basic level is around $15-ish, give or take. None of them are going to be exactly the same, but after that, and I'm sorry, that's $15 per month. And then after that, you can add on extra features or upgrade your plan. So maybe the next upgraded version is around like $25 a month. And it just continuously gets higher and higher the more capabilities that you add to your website. It could end up costing you somewhere around $100 a month if you want, the full works. But for just starting out and for many businesses, the base plan is just fine. It has everything that you'll need. And then as you go on, you may want to add more things. So that's also something to take in consideration when you are picking which platform to use, is which features you may want to add on later. So what features do they have available for you to use? And when we say features, we're talking about things like maybe a scheduling platform or calendar of events. It could also be an online store that's pretty popular. So those types of things that maybe you don't need right away. Maybe if you're just starting out your company, you want to just have the bases just as a landing page for people to see your company and see what you have. And then as you go on, maybe in the next 5 years, you want to add on a storefront. Just keep that in mind and try to look for a website hosting platform that has that capability there for you. And really look at the full amount of features that they offer and what the cost is associated with them. Because again, that's going to be something that you're going to want to look at in the future. If you know that you're just going to want a basic website forever, then that's totally fine. There's not going to be a ton of difference between all of them. So just going with that basic level at first. Another thing to take into consideration is the customer support. So this is, again, most people are starting out as beginners, and the customer support is something that really needs to be taken into consideration. So if you do have trouble with your website, are there YouTube videos to help? Are there question forums? Is there a customer service number that you can call and talk to a real person? Those are important things to take into consideration, especially if you know you're going to need help. There is a pretty big learning curve with creating a website if you've never done it before, or if you're unfamiliar with the process. So taking into consideration who is available to help you do that. Something that a lot of people kind of forget about. And then lastly would be your own comfort level. What level are you in terms of, technologically savvy, where you're able to do this on your own? Some of these platforms are a little bit easier than others. Some of them are a little bit more user-friendly. So maybe making you can use all of these websites for free, just to kind of play around. So maybe make an account with them, see what the interface is like, see what it's like to build a website, and decide, okay, yeah, this one I cannot do. It's just a little bit too confusing for me, and realize that you may need to go to a different one. That's all really personal to you. There's not too much that we can say to kind of sway you in one direction or another. You're just going to have to go in and see for yourself which one you're most comfortable working with and which one you're most comfortable learning. So there's just some things to keep in mind when you are picking your platform, but that's definitely step number one. Now that you've decided which platform you're going to use, the next thing to think about is which pages you want to include on your website. So if you go back to the analogy of the house, the pages are like the rooms. So you're going to navigate to these pages on your website, and each page will have separate information about the topic that is included. So the first page that everyone should always have is a home page. This is going to be the first page and the first thing that people see when they go to your website. So it's really important on your homepage to have the look down exactly how you want it. So making sure that all your colors, your fonts, everything is good. Having a lot of good pictures on your homepage. And you also don't want too much information on your homepage. This is going to be a quick little intro to your business, and then kind of directing people throughout the website where they need to go for more information. What I like to do personally when I'm helping people make their websites is on the homepage have buttons that go to the other pages. So, for example, it may be your homepage with a big picture of your farm, and then your business name right above it. And when you scroll down, maybe you'll have a short explanation of your business saying exactly what you do. And then from there, little buttons that go to the separate sections of your website, the different pages. But yeah, the homepage does not need to be long. It does not need to have a ton of information, kind of just giving people a quick overview. Next up, which I think, especially for small businesses and farm businesses specifically, the about page is extremely important. A lot of times people want to kind of discredit themselves, unfortunately. The about page is really an opportunity rather, for you to dive deep into your story, focus on the farm, focus on maybe when you guys started, the family story that goes behind it, any personal things that you feel comfortable sharing would go in the about page. And then also the farming practices that you use. So what, again, is your selling point? Always go back to that. And how does that play into your story of your farm and of your business? The about page is really an opportunity for you to kind of get out any background information that isn't directly associated with your product. So again, how long have you been at your land? Is it, are you fourth generation? Is it a brand new project that you're starting with your wife and your kids? All of this is really great information to put in your about page. I also caution people not to make it too wordy though. Again, a lot of pictures is great on the about page, a lot of pictures of the farm, of the family, working. Just trying to make it personal, but also keep in mind, people may not want to read all of it. They don't want to read a whole book about you. So keeping it short still, but including the information going into a little bit more detail just about the personal aspect and what makes your farm so special. Next up would be the products page. That's pretty self-explanatory. If you're not selling online, that's totally fine. This is still an opportunity on this page to go into more detail about the products that you offer. For example, if you are I think we used the example of the beef farm earlier. Let's stick with that. So if you're a beef farm, you don't need to go into every single cut that you have, but kind of explaining what array of products you have. So if you're selling, USDA cuts, include that. But if you also sell, halves and quarters and wholes, include that. So how are people getting your product? In what form are they getting your product? And what are all the products that you offer? It's also really important to put on this page what your selling point is. So what makes your product special? Are you, again, grass-fed? Are you organic? Do you follow certain farming practices that make the product actually better? And if so, kind of explain that a little, and explain why this product is better than other products that are on the market that might be similar. So that's really an opportunity for you to go into detail about what they're buying. If you do have some prices that you wanted to list, for example, if you have a full price list, maybe you can include that, but just keep in mind that you have to update it whenever you update your prices. And sometimes people don't like to put their prices out that openly. It's just a personal decision, and very dependent on what kind of business you're running. And the last page that should absolutely be included is the contact form, or contact page rather. You can do a form on this page where it will link directly to your email, and we'll go over that a little bit in the next slide. But for right now, a contact page should definitely include every way that they can contact you. So whether that's a phone number, an email, an address, all of those things should be very, very clearly presented to the customer. I also typically have people put their contact information in the footer of their website in that bottom section, just so that it's very easily available to the customer while they're on your website. Definitely suggest that. You can also include, maybe if you have a farm stand or if you are at a farmer's market, that may be something that you want to include in the contact page. But typically the contact page is very cut and dry. This is how you contact me. This is how you buy my product. Next is just other things that you might want to include, just very dependent on your business. It might make sense, it might not. So things like where to buy. So if you're selling in multiple farm stands or multiple farmers markets, stores, that might be something that you can include here. You might include a shop online option. Again, that's one of those added features that you may have to pay extra for. And shopping online and having an online store bring a whole plethora of other issues such as taxes, but it may make sense for your business. So just look into that personally and see if that makes sense for your business. So yeah, there are a few other pages as well that you can add that I've listed here. It's just very dependent on you, on what your comfort level is, but they definitely aren't needed right away. If you want to just start out with the basics, the home page, the about page, the products, and the contact, those are the basics that every website definitely needs. Really quickly, I did want to go over the difference between a contact page versus a contact form. So I gave you two examples here. The one on the left would be an example of a contact page, where there's just information where you can find the location, there's the phone number, there's a map showing the address, you have their social media down there, an email probably. And then a contact form is fillable. So this is something that might show up where someone can type in their name, their email address and a message, and it will get emailed directly to you. You can also do a combination of both. You can have a contact form on your contact page. That's totally fine. The only thing that I suggest against with the contact form, or kind of just advise on, is you need to make sure that you will actually check them and respond to them. So if you know that you're really, really bad at checking your emails, or that you don't fully understand the concept of how a contact form works quite yet, you may want to hold off on that on your website at first. It is really convenient for customers. It takes out a lot of the steps for them. I definitely also, if you do have a contact form, I would also include a phone number for people to reach you at, just because some people don't really like doing things over the internet. Some people prefer to have that phone call, or they may need a bit extra help and don't want to wait for a response through email. So I would definitely include both, some way for them to email you, or a contact form plus a phone number. In terms of the map and your location, putting an address online, that is very dependent on your type of business. If you have a farm stand, yes, absolutely need the address. But if you are maybe a dairy operation and you don't really want people coming to your location, then don't include it. That's totally fine. But that's just personal, and definitely depends on what kind of business you're running. If you want people at your site, you need to have an address there. Same thing with the contacts. I know some farmers don't really like to be contacted. However, it is part of owning a business. So you do need to have some sort of way for people to contact you with questions or concerns. So just keep that in mind, and keep in mind the difference between these two and your own level of expertise with this. Now that we're ready to start designing our website, one thing to kind of keep in mind is what makes a website bad. We're also going to talk about what makes a website good, of course, but I wanted to start out here talking about some of the things to avoid, or some of the things to keep in mind when you're initially starting out. And what's nice about the website platforms is that typically they have pretty easy to use templates to use, which help you avoid a lot of these issues. But it's still important to talk about, just so you can keep an eye out for certain things. One of the things that is really important to think about on your website is space. So something that could ruin a website is if there's too much or too little space. You do not want to be cluttered, but you also don't want to be bare, where it's just words and no pictures. So finding that balance of minimalism versus maximalism, where it is just words and pictures everywhere and it's hard to read and it's hard to understand, versus just having the bare bones information where your website's boring and pretty forgettable. So keep that in mind. I think that's definitely something easy to spot. I just kind of walking that middle ground of having a nice balance between words, pictures, and background space where there's nothing at all. So another thing to keep in mind is bad navigation. So what that means on your website is, how are people getting to the different pages of your website from your homepage? You know, how I like to, what I mentioned earlier is that I like to have buttons that go to different pages. There's also usually a navigation tool either at the top or on the side that helps you find all the different pages. If you don't have one of those, it can be kind of confusing for people to find what they're looking for. And that's something, I mean, that's the reason people are at your website, is to get information. So you want to make sure that they can do that easily and aren't going to struggle too much. So having bad navigation can really ruin a site. And going along with really all of this is that it might be difficult to read or understand. And that can be from your design choices, that can be from poor navigation, that can be from a lot of different things. But difficulty to read, you have no idea how many times I've seen websites that have a black background with like dark red words over top, and that is just not going to work. People can't read it. So if you're using a dark background, make sure you're using white or a really, really light color font, and vice versa. If you have a white background, make sure you're using either dark font or some type of colored font that's not going to be too bright, and you can easily read it. Another thing that might make your website bad is broken links. And what that means is maybe you're linking to a farmer's market that you sell at. So for example, if you are going to if you have a page on your website that is where to buy, and you talk about the farmer's market, and maybe you want to link to their website, make sure you're using the right link. Make sure the link that you have actually functions, and when people click on it, they get taken to the right space. This is something that you can do really once the design's all done. Just go back and double check everything, make sure that everything is linking up correctly, make sure that the information that you want accessible is actually accessible, because if not, then again, people are not going to be able to get the information that they came there for. Lastly, which I think is something that a lot of people have trouble with, is the inconsistency. And that can be inconsistency in fonts, in colors, in graphics, or just overall inconsistency throughout the website. And one way to combat that is, over here on the right of the slide, I have what's called Color Hunt. And that is a website that you can go to choose color palettes. And that really helps out people if you're unsure of what colors go well together or what colors contrast each other. Go over there, and there's other versions of this online as well that you can use to kind of help you figure out which color palette works best, so that your font and the colors and the graphics that you're using all kind of either follow the same scheme and theme of the website, and make the website look better overall. Because something that a lot of people struggle with is when your homepage looks, maybe it's on a white background with blue font of a certain, a specific font, and then your about page looks totally different. It almost looks like it's a different website completely, and that really throws people off, and it's definitely not great. So keep some of these things in mind. There's definitely other things that can make a website bad, but these are just some of the main ones that I see most often. So of course, now that we've talked about what makes a website bad, we want to talk about what makes a good website. And I wanted to include this link right here at the top from Site Builder Report. If you go to that website and you look up agriculture farm websites, they have a great example. They have 30 great examples, actually, of farm websites that are done really well. It'll also tell you what platform they were used to make, and what about them was done well. So that's actually where I got this example over on the right here. But there are a few things that go into making a good website. And one of the main ones is having high quality pictures, preferably your own for certain things. But if you're just using it for a background, like how this one is at the top, you don't necessarily need your own. You can use stock images to get really high quality pictures of something that's relevant to your farm. Of course, if it is your own, that's better, but it doesn't have to be by any means. There are certain pages on your website where you're going to absolutely want your own pictures. And that's something about maybe your about page. You're obviously going to want real pictures of your farm and real pictures of you and your family if you want to include them. And people will be able to tell whether or not it's real or not. But you do also want those pictures to be high quality and high resolution pictures. So just keep that in mind. You may need to take some pictures specifically for your website if you don't already have some. And then another important part of making a good website is readability. So if you can look here on the top right, where they have, this is their homepage, where they have the fresh organic vegetables. So they wanted a really busy picture behind as, the main focus of the page. However, they still needed information to be readable. So over a really busy picture like that, if you were to just put words there, you would not be able to read them. It would just be impossible. There's no font that you could use, no color that you could use that would make that understandable. So something really easy to just go about that is adding in that white box where you can type over to make sure that what you have to say is still readable, but you still have the picture as another main focus. So keep that in mind, the readability of everything. And that's what I mentioned in the last slide too, about having dark backgrounds and very light font versus vice versa. So readability, very important. The next thing to keep in mind is a clear message. So making sure that you are being consistent with your branding and the aesthetics, and making sure that it's clear what you do and who you are as a business. So does your website match your business and your mission? Does it match your personal aesthetics, and everything that goes along with your business? Making sure your website is really cohesive to your branding. And I gave an example of that with this farm. You can see their homepage at the top, which, you know, they're using all the same font in both. And then the bottom one is their produce guide, where they have all of their products, like their product page. Everything is really consistent. They're using the same layout of the white box with the title. They have the same font throughout everything. Everything is very readable, and it all matches very well with what kind of business they're in. So obviously they have the green and the tans, their vegetable business, and those are very typical farming colors too, is the green and the tan. So you can't really go wrong with those. And so they're doing a great job at having a clear message, consistent branding, and the aesthetics of things all matching. They're doing a really great job with that. And another really important thing to keep in mind when you're making a good website is making sure it's user-friendly. So again, this goes back to that last slide of making sure that the navigation is easy for people, making sure that it's easy for people to find the information that they need. So ask yourself, if you were visiting the site for the first time, would you know how to get the information that you need? And that can be a little difficult to do when you're the one creating it. Typically, I just tell people to leave the website alone for a few days and then come back to it with a fresh mind. Sometimes if you're staring at it for too long, things can get a little muddled and you start to get a little confused with everything, and you know, all of it's starting to blur together. So try to get it into that consumer mindset. Leave it alone for a little bit, come back to it, or have your friends or family look over the site and get feedback from them. Because at the end of the day, like I mentioned earlier, we're all consumers. We all have personal preferences. So it's great to have outside people come in and give their perspective on it and maybe work out some of the kinks. So again, if you have a friend or a family member who can take a look at the website and just say, oh yeah, no, this all makes sense to me. Or, well, how do I find out what farmer's market you're at or where the farmer's market is? Oh, I didn't include that. Thanks. I'll add that in there. Something as simple as that really, really makes your website a lot better. So yeah, keep that in mind. And again, there are a lot of other things that make a website good or bad. Obviously, a lot of it is personal. A lot of it is very dependent on your business. So it's difficult to say exactly what to do or not do, but these are just some general tips to keep in mind. Okay, so thank you everyone. Like I said, I know this presentation is much shorter than the previous ones were. We wanted to leave plenty of time for questions for everyone. So if you have any questions about today's topic or the other topics in the webinar series, like Facebook, Instagram, or the Google Business, please definitely ask them. Our contact information is also here if you'd like to write it down. We will also drop it in the chat just for everyone to see too. So yeah, thank you again, everyone.